All right, I'm in. I see Josh. I see Matt. Can you guys hear me now?
Affirmative.
Sorry, no, I can't hear you. I'm not sure I'm a fan of this moderation style with not getting questions beforehand.
All right, can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Hello.
Right,
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Nick.
Nick, hello, hello. Hi, Matt.
Hello.
Hi, Josh. All right, so it looks like we're just waiting for Tyler. Thank you for the patience with the technical issues.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I think I'm going to turn on, I may turn down the chat since I'm getting blips.
Oh, that would be fun.
I'm getting blips every time somebody says something.
Wait, chat has sounds?
Yeah,
Well, there's
you can turn them off. Yeah,
apparently I did that a long time ago.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I'm going to... Where's that thing?
People can't see us yet, can they?
Not yet, I don't think.
Good.
No, that's not right.
All right, well, welcome guys to the period of review. I hope Tyler can get in soon. Today's period of review is covering the second edition, including our guests Nick Yankovic, that is, Nick Yank, who is our now retiring second edition brand manager. We have Matt Kirk, who is in charge of the 2E creative team. We have Josh Sheets, known as Prylar Durden, who is the current head of the errata team. And hopefully Tyler Foltz will be joining us soon, DJ Stormtrooper, as our design guru and also head of rules. So welcome, everybody.
Hello.
I'd like to take this moment to thank Nick for all of his hard work in the last few years as the 2E brand manager. And we hope that your life settles down soon, good things happen, and that I really appreciate all the work that you've done for us over the years.
Thank you.
All right. So I wanted to start off if each guest has any sort of opening remarks, anything that they would like to say. So I was going to start with Nick on this one.
Yep. All right. Thanks, Maggie. Just a quick overview of 2E. So the past year, 2E has seen the release of 3 new expansions. The 20th anniversary collection, celebrating 20 years of Star Trek CCG. Followed by Strange Bedfellows, which focused on the Dominion and DS9, my personal favourite. Lower Decks, focusing on Voyage from the Borg, and there's another expansion being released very shortly, which is Face of the Enemy, which is Tyler's first set as lead designer. And the emphasis on that one is ships, in particular Romulans and the Next Generation. Our errata team has continued to do good work, and although it's been a bit controversial here and there, it's been a huge success. I, I think anyway. We've gotten to the position of design where we wanted to get to. We've got new lead designers. We've taken some burden off of Charlie, and also hopefully bringing some new, fresh ideas. I think that's been seen how the meta has changed up considerably over the past year, which must be a good thing. We had a slightly broken deck at the Europeans this year, with my friend Matt Slade over everyone with his 122 card draw deck. It was out and attempting on turn 2, now being errated. And I managed to win the American Continentals and the Jersey Belt, which is right here. So it's been a good year for Brits. Unfortunately, I've also had a rather time-consuming year. A lot of personal issues, which have proved very difficult in juggling those issues and my role as brand manager. I think some of the people on the panel here can testify that I've dropped the ball a couple of times, and especially Tyler would agree. This has led to my recent resignation, but for now, at least, I am here. Thanks, Maggie.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nick. So let's go then to Matt with Creative.
Good morning, everybody. I'm glad to say that 2A Creative has had a very good year, I think. We've had some of the most exciting stuff to put on the cards. That's mostly coming from design, letting us kind of stretch our brains a little bit. And we really, this last Face of the Enemy set, there's a lot of great stuff, lots of references that honor a lot of Decipher traditions, and I hope to continue to be able to do so in the future.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt. And I got to say, I love the set icon for Face of the Enemy.
That's all Johnny.
All right. So Tyler was here for a moment, but so Josh, tell us a little bit about errata this year.
Well, with any luck, we don't have to do too much. There have been a couple, some controversy based on various 12 or 13 page message board posts. If something needs to happen, we'll get it done. Otherwise, we'll let the game kind of sort itself out. It's just a little extra policing over things that may not work out as intended. Also, shout out to Minnesota Masters going on right now.
Oh, yes, very much so. All right. Oh, here's Tyler. Tyler, are you in? Hello, Tyler.
Hey, what's going on?
All right. Can you have a little opening statement for us here?
About rules or design?
Either one. Both.
Rules I think has gone pretty well this year. We're keeping a low profile, which is I think what rules is supposed to do. Very happy to have gotten out the new version of the rulebook and to not have a CRD for a while. I've really been honored to be able to do design for Rory, and we're working on Crichton right now.
Rory is Face of the Enemy for those of you playing along now.
Ah, yes. Haven't gotten used to the new name yet.
I respect the decision not to go with Project Clara after Project Rory, by the way.
Well, I would still like to tell Nick that I think Crichton is a horrible name for anything, and I misspell it almost every time.
And we all laugh when you do.
What's better than Farscape?
All right, so let's get started with the different sections, just of things that I noticed out of the surveys. First thing, of course, survey shows that people disagree about everything, which should not surprise anybody sitting here right now. All right, so it was, as I found out as I was looking through the survey, Lower Decks was the most popular art expansion by far. Any thoughts on that, Matt? What made that the most popular expansion?
That was kind of interesting. I mean, I wish Johnny was here to give you from the horse's mouth, but I work pretty closely with him. At least I have more increasingly this past year or two. And I give them their marching orders as far as just kind of vague ideas about, well, we're going to use this story, so we need something from this episode, and they usually come back with something that's at least twice as good as what I thought of. Lower Decks was a little bit different. I ended up giving them specific images and saying, okay, here's what I want, and beat that. And they did. They just completely smashed it out of the park. And there were a few that made it through that I originally suggested, but they came up with a lot of good stuff to put in that set, and I was very happy to see it when it was all put together.
Yeah, you know, my original thought on why that was the most popular one was just because it was the most recent expansion, you know, and that was the one that was in everybody's minds at the time. But then I looked at the 1E stuff, and it was those were all over the place. Lots of people had different opinions on that. You know, most of the stuff on art was just, you know, you're doing great things, keep up with that. I did have an interesting one that says, suggestion from the community: make sure people know how much work it is art-wise to errata a Decipher era card. So,
totally. It is basically what Johnny has to do, again, from my understanding. He's explained it a couple times, but what the process that goes into it, you can't just take a template and throw some text on it and hope it works. He has to rebuild the entire file from scratch, basically, to make it come up to the standards of high resolution that we're basically spoiled with, the quality that art pumps out every year. So to build just one errata card takes a lot of time, because they have to do the background, they have to do the shading, they have to smooth out any edges that would normally come in a video transfer, they have to, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not just, you know, oh yeah, let's decide to errata this today. Sure, no problem. I mean, especially for some of those early Decipher cards, like from second edition Energize, we don't have super high res files of that stuff. So for them to rebuild it is a big undertaking.
that's good to know. Good to know. All right. So any other thoughts from the panelists on art stuff right now?
Well, for future reference, I'm going to make sure I try and get as many Decipher cards errated as I can, just for Johnny. And then, as far as the prettiest set goes, yeah, it was competing with Strange Bedfellows, which, no offense, most of the Dominion species are not that pretty. I mean, I'm a big fan of Jem'Hadar, but those are some hard guys to look at.
Well, speaking to that point, there were a couple of guys in there that were kind of scratching the bottom of the barrel as far as coming up with original Jem'Hadar and Vorta and stuff, and you know, they'll probably be able to find a couple more, but we're pretty stretched to the limit. So we'll probably be just, at least if we have any new characters of those species, we'll probably be reusing old personas or something along that road.
So what about photoshopping? That's been happening a lot over in the Lenny side lately. Any thoughts on that?
From what I understand, again, Johnny can correct me on the message boards if this is totally inaccurate. He's trying to keep Tui as, say, photorealistic as possible. I mean, he's trying to stick with what you saw in the episodes, and occasionally, like, you see the new Romulus. That was a little bit of, you know, you saw this in the movie and you saw this in an episode, and you kind of slapped them together to make a stupidly awesome card. You might see a little bit of that, but as far as manipulation, he tends to stay away from that kind of stuff, just because it's a ton of extra work. Because in addition to all the templating and stuff he has to do for a normal card, then on top of that there's the, okay, well now we have to make this look like it actually came out of a Star Trek episode, and raise to that level of quality. The manipulation has to be very, very good.
All right, good. Thanks, Matt. You know, people are so moving on from art into creative. You know, people have been just thinking that creative's been doing a great job right now. I actually only had one, like, even remotely ugly comment, which was sometimes cute isn't that great.
Mm-hmm. And I understand that.
And my own comment, which was put down the thesaurus, Mr. Kirk.
Yeah, and you know, the reason that I was attracted to, or not the reason, but one of the reasons that I was attracted to Decipher products in the first place was the level of detail that they went to set up a card, to give you all the information if you hadn't seen the episode, to kind of remind you, oh yeah, that's what happened. And so, as creative manager, I've tried to kind of honor that tradition, come up with elegant and possibly a little bit oblique ways of describing things, but in such a way that kind of focuses your attention on, well, what does that mean? And you know, if you have to go look up a word and remember, oh, right, that's what the thing was. I think the most obsolete word we used, this word was, maybe it was last year, I'm not sure, it was Euchnaic Explorer for a niche. That had a very specific usage, because if you watch Insurrection, whenever she slows down time and does her little magic thing, it's all focusing on the breath, and that's what Euchnaic means. It means good breath, like while you're sleeping. So that was kind of a, you know, that was a bit of a creative conceit, but I feel like most of the stuff that we're doing is trying to, you know, maybe make people's vocabulary improve a little bit. You know, I do have a degree in education, so I have that desire to you know, use the 50-cent words every once in a while. But I cannot say enough about my team. I don't really come up with a whole lot of original ideas. I really just kind of have to spackle in where there's a couple cards that fall through the cracks and nobody really has a great idea for it. And then I was like, well, how about we do that? I mean, we're talking 85% plus comes from 2 or 3 guys on the creative team, Triumph and Faithful Reader, and occasionally we'll get some of the 1E creative guys who will poke their heads in and drop a couple suggestions, but they do quality work, and they deserve all the attention for all the great work that's been coming out of creative.
All right. Well, thanks, Matt, and we do appreciate all the work that creative does. You know, Michael Moskop's in my play group, and I occasionally get tidbits of where we're, you know, he doesn't no secrets or anything like that, but I do know how much work that you guys are doing for that.
And it's funny because I know Mike hasn't been able to contribute as much as he used to, but every once in a while I'll get something that's just super juicy from him, and I'm really excited to get to use that stuff. So, any suggestions anybody has? If you've got some story that you want to see on a 2E card somewhere, just drop me a private message, and we'll try to work it in. I mean, I'm always happy to hear from people, individual suggestions like that.
All right, good. So, all right, so let's move on from art and creative. Let's head into design. So, you know, that's an interesting contrast that I noticed between 2E and 1E. Here in 2E, people think that the design elements, flavor, affiliation, enforcement, balance, simplicity, all these things seem to be balanced as equally important amongst the groups, and it was in 1E, and I'll talk about that tomorrow. It was one thing was the big hit for design in that element. So and that just, I think, speaks to the balance along the card of all the different things that go into design. So moving on from that comment. What elements of Strange Bedfellows, do you guys think allowed it to edge out Lower Decks in voting for the best design in the last year?
I didn't quite get the question.
Oh, so in the voting for which set had the best design, Strange Bedfellows edged out Lower Decks just by a little bit. So I was wondering if you guys had any thoughts on that. What might have been the reasoning for that?
I think one of the reasons is the Dominion was a popular affiliation that just didn't get any love until recently.
Those 2 Stakoran missions are pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
That is true. The Stackerons are pretty good. You know, we had the Deep Space Nine Gamma Quadrant stuff, but that doesn't seem to be getting as much attention as the Dominion
I
did.
think I think part of the reason that people latched on to Strange Bedfellows was it's a good. It shows the strength of our design team right now that it gave people ideas for new decks that weren't necessarily anything specific. It gave the tools to those decks to be able to succeed. Like, obviously the Dominions and the Gamma Quadrant, sure, they can use those missions, but because you got the Dice cast, all of a sudden now Romulan Cardi decks, they're going there too. And yeah, I think Deep Space Nine going to the Gamma Quadrant, yeah, this still kind of, maybe needs a little more help, but as far as just not building decks for people by telling them you have to use this and this and this card to be able to do it, kind of letting people piecemeal stuff into their own decks and see how it improves them. I feel like that's the strength of the set.
Okay, so Nick, Tyler, Josh, any ideas on that one?
In Strange Bedfellows, you got a lot of new toys that could go, like he said, into a lot of different decks. In the next one, you land on lots of space, Voyager, and a bunch of Borg. If you weren't necessarily a fan of those specific builds, it may not either fit into an existing deck or may not specifically interest you in building one of those decks. Granted, they're great cards, but it was probably a smaller target range to hit. Personal opinion.
Okay.
I mean, I think the Dice cast has really had a lot of people building a lot of Romulan Cardassian decks for the Gamma Quadrant. I think it was a really good, well-designed set.
All right. So, anybody else? All right. So, next question. This one came out of the survey. All right. Namira is an example of a great basic personnel that the game really needs. She's that non-aligned with a good skill set, fairly low cost. Just sort of a workhorse kind of personnel. Why is she the first person we've seen who's just been a basic personnel? Feels like we've been getting a lot more wall of text kind of cards lately. So can you guys, Tyler or other guys, what's going on with the wall of text? Why aren't we seeing just more simple cards?
Well, I think in Face of the Enemy, you'll see a little less of that. We've got more of those basic sort of non-unique personnel, and in Crichton, I'm really making it a point to take us back to those basic effective cards. So, I've got unique personnel in the file right now who have no text, who really just stand alone on their skills and keywords. I'm also doing the same thing with missions. So, yeah, I think that point's very well taken, and the design space to make effective, exciting cards that don't have much or any text is still open, and we're going to take advantage of that.
All right, excellent, Tyler. Thank you. Any other thoughts on that, guys?
I think it's the more the game evolves, the more personnel there are. It's been a tendency for certain designers to try and put on new abilities, try and explain them more, and they end up with a great big huge wall of text. You may have seen that in one of the sets I helped design. But hopefully now we're backing away from that anyway.
I also think there's a natural tendency for design to kind of shy away from either trying to reinvent the wheel with a new basic non-aligned personnel like you were talking about with Namira, just because it's like, well, if you're going to make a virtual card, why don't you make it flashy? And it's like, well, that's not what we need all the time. Sometimes we need basic stuff like that to, make different decks, match up with the same power level. But I mean, there's also that pitfall of, the idea of power creep, that if you make another 1-cost, 3-skill TNG guy, that he's automatically going to be better than anybody that came out in second edition because you have to, make people want to play it. And I think design's done a good job, especially with the new set, of kind of finding little niches for those guys to live in that don't necessarily make everything else binder fodder, but still let you choose which abilities you want to use.
Yeah, and I can see where that would be tough, where you want to sort of enforce some flavor with the affiliations. You know, you don't want to give a Romulan telepathy or something like that, because that doesn't make any sense.
They
Even
don't
though
have it
they
in the
don't
show,
have any,
exactly.
even though
Right.
they don't, you know, even though that would be a useful skill for some of them to have, probably.
Right.
So there is that sort of issue happening too.
You can't let
Absolutely.
Ron Perlman out of this. He's got telepathy and he's a Romulan.
Oh, that's right. Excuse me, the Viceroy.
and Major Call.
That's right. All right. So moving on.
Maggie,
Oh yes, Nick.
can I just say then, are people not in favour of more cards like Brian Everth's?
What does he do again?
If I have to read it 3 times before I know what it's doing, and I've played it before, yeah.
He won't stay in my head. Like, I'll read the card, and then it's like the text goes in one ear and out the other one. It's
Yep.
like, what? So I don't know who designed Brian Everth's. I'm not going to go there. All right. So next topic. All right. So there was at least of the survey. Now, of course, the survey is always tricksy because it's the people who are really into something. If you guys ever want to laugh, go look at my Rate My Professor site for examples of this or really hate. But for the most part, people in the survey really, really, really loved Phase 2. Like, that there was universal approval for the Phase 2 design ethic. And I remember when it was first announced, there was a lot of skepticism about that. So could you... beyond that, though, people like the idea, but there's a lot of concern about power cards. So could you, Tyler, address some of the thinking behind cards like Homeward Bound and Crippling Strike that are very powerful, low-cost cards, but can unbalance the time each player gets to spend playing? So there's a lot of stuff in that question.
Well, the first qualification I'd like to make is that I didn't design either of those cards.
Oh,
I think the lesson that the Face of the Enemy and Project Crichton design teams have taken is that we don't want to put those sort of one turn up interrupts into the set. I think it made sense for Voyager in particular to have something like that to speed them along while they're doing space missions. But while it might be tempting to do that for other affiliations, sort of a ruling council style restart, we're trying to shy away from that. It's extraordinarily hard to cost interrupts correctly, and so we don't want to go to that danger spot again.
All right. So what about some of the other successes or failures for the Phase 2 design in the past year? You got any things on hand that you think were really great, or that you're not sure you're going to do that again?
I think Phase 2 on the whole has been great. It's given design a really good template, I think, for making good sets. And so we've only been able to, I think, tighten our script for how we make those sets. You know, Return to Grace had 54 cards, and something around a dozen maybe weren't directly related to the themes of the set. You know, by the time we got to Strange Bedfellows, that had shrunk to 5 or 6. And when we're now making Face of the Enemy and Crichton, I think we're going to have that really down to 0, where all the cards in the set really are focused directly on the affiliations and the themes that we're addressing. So I think phase two's success is really in getting our sets more tightly aligned to our design criteria for those sets. But when we start, we have a very short list of 4 design goals for the set. Help this affiliation, promote this, promote that, and we're sticking very closely to those. And I think a lot of the prior to phase 2 sets weren't so tightly aligned, and they had a lot of stuff that was outside the sort of design goals for the set.
Okay, so Nick, any thoughts on phase 2?
Yeah, I mean, I think Tyler summed it up pretty well. There's always been a lot of backlash when the sets come out on power cards. We've seen it all the way through from the Bajorans and the Dominion, then Voyager with Homeward Bound. But they've all been really good cards, but I don't think we've seen anything that's broken the game yet at all. Crippling Strike, for instance. I know a lot of people don't like it, but it certainly hasn't broken the game. And I think phase 2 is doing exactly what it was set out to do.
Well, I will certainly say that I have been enjoying the affiliation enforcement, and I have enjoyed some of the themes that have been coming out of that. I never thought anybody would come up with a affiliation theme for Deep Space Nine Earth. So kudos on that, guys. It's always sort of the forgotten headquarters.
I think that was Tyler.
We argued about that for months. It really was months of arguing before we arrived at anything for DS9 Earth.
So what else? What other ideas were there? Now you got me curious.
There was
no, save him.
Oh well, there was a Deep Space Nine battle theme in the cut file that we didn't end up going for. The sort of general idea was that DS9 Earth would be the Federation affiliation that does stuff the Federation's not supposed to do. Battle being one of those things. So we ended up going a different road, but that could come back down the line.
Oh, intriguing. All right, so last question on design. Chula the game, love it or hate it. I actually really like the errata for that. Made the Chula pile a viable dilemma pile style. Are there any new dilemma pile themes coming out in the future?
Let's see. I don't think we have one in Face of the Enemy. And all I'll say about Crichton is that we're tying it very closely to missions. So there'll be more dilemmas in Crichton that tie to missions and what order you complete them in, and how much span they have, those kind of attributes. But as far as a specific new pile, I don't think so. There's been a clown sort of clincher card going through the cut files in a few sets, but it hasn't panned out yet.
I think the new pile, if you want to call it that we're going to see is the Romulan interference. It's going to be more having to do with stuff coming out of your deck and amplifying your dilemmas that are existing already, rather than having there be just, there's the increased importance of integrating dilemma pile and deck is going to, I think that's going to be your new pile that you'll see.
Yeah, and that's a broader goal that I have for design, is to link dilemma pile and draw deck, or even missions, more closely than they've been linked before.
All right, so I just got 2 questions popping up from the chat room. This one's from Amber Van Bremen. How do you decide how many cards to dedicate to the target affiliations and how many to dedicate to the other themes / other affiliations? keeping in mind what was mentioned earlier, that if people don't like certain affiliations, they may not like a set. How do you keep them happy?
For the sets we've done recently, we're shooting for a 45 card set. So I think it ends up being about a dozen for each of the themes. I think Strange Bedfellows might have had 15 for Dominion and DS9 each. For Face of the Enemy, I think it was a little more evenly split between between TNG, Romulans, Ships Matter, and then some of our iconic ships. I know with Crichton, we went into testing very explicitly with a quarter of each. So we had 4 themes, 4 goals for the set. The testing file went in with roughly 15 for each, and we've been whittling down from there with the goal of getting to our 45. And we're just using the previous Phase 2 sets as a template for that.
Gotcha. And one more question. Ross is like, Ross just posted a less politically correct one. When the F will you get around to Klingons?
Well, Klingons along with Ferengi are a very tough Phase 2 project because those 2 affiliations already have very distinct identities. Klingons with their battling, and Ferengi with having stuff under Ferenginar and their cycling. So other affiliations, I think, are going to be higher priorities because their themes are more spread out and they don't have that singular identity that affiliation does.
Well, plus I imagine, the Klingon Riker sword decks are very powerful and have been powerful for a while now, that it's going to be hard to come up with another theme that are going to get people to play that instead of Klingon Riker sword.
That doesn't mean that we can't do it. That doesn't mean that we're not going to attempt it. Maquis is an example of affiliation that's very good. It's got a lot of powerful stuff. And so we can't be afraid, just because that's the case, to never make cards for them again. Romulans, TNG, Maquis, those are all good Tier 1 affiliations, but we're still making new cards for them to focus their themes and push them in more thematic areas.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there because I'm probably going, but I would like a Phase 2 expansion that focuses on the movies, as in the original series, movie set, and the Klingons. Probably won't happen now, but maybe one day.
I think there's a lot of design space to do a Phase 2 alternate universe expansion and just focus on all the alternate universe sort of factions as a whole.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on from design into errata. All right, so the community supports errata as the solution to broken cards, but there is still a feeling around the community that at times the errata team oversteps its bounds, especially in the case of the Romulan errata most recently. Has errata been successful at curbing broken strategies without neutering those cards?
Before Josh answers that, can I just say, when people say they're overstepping their bounds, what the hell does that mean?
I think that there are people who are very upset that their Romulans they think that their Romulan tricks have all been taken away from them.
Yeah, okay. Josh,
all right. Well, to start with that, we had a Masters, I want to say Chicago, where Romulans won that after all of those things had been done. So we didn't really knock them out. We just toned them down a little bit. There were stuff that, like Tyler had mentioned, you need to make sure that things have costs, things have requirements. Making things with no requirements on them, or no real requirement on them, is something that needs to be looked at. So, and nobody, no matter what we do, somebody will dislike it.
Well, of course. You can't please all the people all the time. You can't even please most of the people some of the time.
That is true. I've seen many double-figure page threads about errata, calling for errata to be disbanded, calling for errata to be given back to design, for not to touch any cards, so on and so forth. And for the most part, we don't hit that many cards. This is, we'll go 10 cards in the last, I'll say, year and a half-ish. I don't have that exact number. And 2 of them, at least, were to curb completely abusive decks that would have been event-ruining experiences. Nick mentioned the one earlier from, was it UK Nationals? UK
European Continentals.
Yes. So, yeah, we're not necessarily looking to just go hammer a bunch of stuff, but if something bad happens, we need to take care of it.
I will just say, as someone behind the scenes, from when Continuing Community started to where we are now, the method that we handle errata now versus how we used to handle it, far superior. I have been really pleased with how the errata team has worked out. I haven't necessarily agreed with all the decisions that they've made on cards, but by and large, they are doing much better than the situation we had before, where it was just kind of like, well, sort of, maybe we should do that because we want to design this cool card later on. Having it as a separate entity is a far superior structure rather than having design drive errata. Or rules on the other end, because we tried both of those and neither of those worked. So having an independent body do it it's proved that it's been much superior.
And granted, that's why we have someone from design and someone from rules on the errata team, because we're trying to work with them, keep the original intent of the card, make sure it's not going to break worse if we do something. Yeah, I suggested one of the things for something, and it's like, well, that would actually just make it worse. It's like, oh yeah, that might. So yeah, we want to work with them and make better the cards, enhance the cards, not disrupt and take away from all the work that the other people have done, and they've put in a lot of work on these.
There was a funny comment that somebody put up about Dear Errata Team, thanks for not being like, to borrow from another game, from Hearthstone. They completely changed the text on one of their cards that was really popular to do something completely useless. And I'm really glad we don't have that situation, that we're still trying to honor the intent of the original card by just ironing out all the rules and power curve issues that they have.
I do have one thing, and it's bugged me because I loved the card when it first came out. I mean, it completely sucked when it got played on you, but Q from first edition. That was an amazing, amazing card and idea and concept. Yes, it was horribly broken, but the new version of it is okay. Never mind. So we're going to try and keep the original intent of the card as much as we can, but making sure it stays in line with where other things should be.
So that actually leads into my next question about errata. We did have the issue with Robin Leffler and one of the million Kiras at European Continentals. Now, it feels like Robin's errata...
Still in testing.
Oh, it's still in testing? Okay.
It is still in testing. We have a couple of versions we're looking at. We haven't gotten enough feedback on them yet, but it should be done fairly soon, still keeping the intent of the card and making her playable again without the potential to just abuse it like that again.
Okay, so actually that's still leading into my question, which was, should we in TUI adopt a ban list where we could have put Robin Leffler on the ban list and wait until she's fixed until she can go back out into play?
We could do that. The option's always there. There's no set rule that says we can't ban a card, but that's never come up yet. I think a quick fix in the short term is better than banning a card.
I'm categorically opposed to that.
I mean, if you start talking about a ban list, you start talking about a different tournament format, basically. I mean, because if you look at 1E, they have Open and they have OTF. And Open, you can do whatever you want. And OTF, there's a specific, strike through list that you can't play. And I guess we could, but I think the way that it's being handled right now is sufficient for our needs. I don't think there's a wholesale list of cards from 2E that we need to just start striking through yet. 5 years down the road, the card pool is getting bigger. Maybe we relook at it then. But for right now, no.
So this isn't the organized play review or anything, but how many open tournaments, other than say the Cool tournament or Sealed, get played each year? There's not a lot of them.
We don't have a whole lot of sadists left, which that's
they're
okay.
amazing.
That's okay by me.
All right, so the last thing in errata. There's a few cards suggested for the watch list, but there was no backing justification for any of them. So feel free to disregard this list: Crippling Strike, Homeward Bound, Unrelenting, and All-Consuming Evil.
One of those actually is on the watch list. Yeah, Crippling Strike is on the watch list.
Ah, I couldn't remember.
I keep that one bookmarked.
Well, I should hope so.
Well, yeah.
All right, so any other comments on errata before we move on to rules?
I would like to thank the team. They've done a wonderful job, and it's been a helpful process, and I hope to keep having wonderful team members for as long as I'm around and after.
I will say that not committing to any release date or anything, Creative and Art are working on updated errata files for going back and updating all of the different expansions with version 1.1 of all of the, going back to Undiscovered Country and going through and updating with the actual. Because if you click on them now, they still have the old version. To get the new version, you have to build the deck and then print the thing out, and it gives you the errata file. So we're working on updating all our old documentation so that it's consistent throughout. But like I said, long way yet. We're working on it. We've been making all the correct documentation for it, making change logs, and it's kind of a low priority project, but we know it's important, especially for new players. And we want to make sure that everybody's got the tools to play with the updated versions of cards.
Cool. Thanks, Matt.
Peak performance may take a while.
Not longer than Allegiance.
All right, so moving on to rules, and there was really a quick interesting suggestion, and then I'll get on to the one meaty question that was on everybody's mind. An interesting suggestion to create a cheat sheet for TDs giving quick answers to the most common issues that come up in a tournament. Now, I don't know how one would determine which one are the most common issues, but it was an interesting idea that I saw in the survey.
That's kind of what the PDF printout from the rules tool will get you. There's a function within the rules tool. You can print that out with just a list of all the rulings that are in that tool, and that should cover most of it.
Awesome. I didn't even know that existed. That's the this is not the public relations period of review, but that. The website is so vast.
Yeah, that particular function has not had a whole lot of recognition, but yeah, it's very, very handy. And whenever whenever we get to update that with something, and it's like, hey, all you got to do is press this one button, and hey, you got all your answers. Yeah, it should probably get a little bit higher signal to noise ratio on that one.
Yeah, Chris did some amazing work on the rules tool.
All right, so so on to the big meaty question that was, as I said before, the one that was on everybody's mind. Please explain the difference between when and while.
Right, so, I mean, in the most basic sense, when is a trigger that happens once when something occurs. While is, a trigger that you can execute as long as the trigger remains true. Where do you want to go from there?
Well, there were questions about people saying, well, can we please update cards like, for instance, Robin Leffler and the observation drone, so that what they do falls in line, how they're interpreted falls in line with the current understanding of when and while. Because if some people were feeling that there was some rules lawyering going on, that these particular cards work this way because it's this particular situation. So I don't know if you had any comments on that, Tyler, or other folks.
Wait, people are calling for more errata?
I know, right?
There has been some consternation, I know, about personnel who use their skills on missions and how many times they can trigger per mission attempt. I'll let the cat out of the bag a little bit that there's even disagreement on how that works within the rules committee. So that's always something we're looking at, and when we find an elegant solution, we'll certainly push it out. In the meantime, on the design side, I know we're looking to not rely on the when-while wording to limit our cards for us. There were a few cards, like in Tacking in the Wind, for example, that I think sort of took advantage of the when-while dichotomy to limit themselves. A good example might be the Commander of the Enterprise B.
On Harrington.
Yeah,
Harriman. Thank you.
And so we've gotten away from that, and we're putting very explicit limits on each card that says you can only do this once per dilemma, or you can only do this once per turn, or whatever the case may be, so that those rules questions don't come up.
The other big picture answer for that question is, do you really want to revise that many cards? Because once you fix one card, then you've got to fix these two other cards. Now you've got to fix these four other cards. It's like tapestry. He pulled on a thread, he unraveled the whole thing. It's the game we have. It's one of those little quirks. If there's stuff that comes up that's specifically limiting either design from doing new exciting stuff, or a new deck type comes out that's super oppressive, like the Kira First Officer issue, Errata can address it at that point. But I mean, at some point you got to just live with the idiosyncrasies like that. And yeah, it's frustrating for new players, but that's just a part of the learning curve of what we have. It's not to say that we're insensitive to that particular aspect. It's just saying we would rather put out more content for the game. We'd rather recruit new players. We'd rather make a better community, and if we have time for that, yeah, we can start addressing that. But overall, it's got a pretty low priority compared to all the other exciting stuff we're trying to do for the game.
All right, awesome. Thanks, guys. Any other thoughts on rules? All right, then I've got a few random comments, questions, etc., and we will be done for this period of review. First thing I noticed as I was looking through the 1E versus the 2E surveys, I found the first edition players absolutely loved the 20th anniversary collection, and it barely registered for the 2E players. Why the difference?
What was in that set again?
It's probably because we didn't have any any QR codes in the TUI set.
I think it was mostly because it wasn't conceived of as part of Phase 2. It was like it was pre-Phase 2 that, we knew it was coming up, and so it got put on the design calendar. But when it finally came around to it, because it was a smaller set, it couldn't do a lot of the stuff that Phase 2 design wanted to do. It was just kind of like, here's a cool card, and here's a cool card, and here's a cool card. So it kind of suffered from, like what Nick was talking about, that kind of syndrome of the old thinking of, well, we got a bunch of these kind of piecemeal cards, but they don't really do much together. So, but I mean, a set like that, where it's kind of top-down design, meaning, the flavor gets put on first. If people decide they really don't like that kind of stuff, we can try to avoid doing that in the future. But for my mileage, I like to see something like that every once in a while, where you get something that's not necessarily going to fit. It's not going to be in a Tier 1 deck all the time, but yeah, every once in a while, yeah, let's bust out Time Lord Wesley and see what he can do, Which I really wanted to keep as a subtitle, but we went with Apprentice Traveler instead.
Okay. So actually that kind of brings me to my next question. Should we see more story-oriented mechanics in second edition? So I was thinking of the archaeology commanders, playing that deck with that suite of cards feels like you're playing the episode, The Chase.
It's really tough to do that. It's very hard to make that kind of stuff work. An example was in the DS9 Earth set. Why am I blanking? Balance of Terror. In Balance of Terror, we really wanted to get the Dominion War in as its own theme and have some engagements and Federation attack fighters and all the sorts of things that would sort of take place in a set that was in conflict with itself, with DS9 Earth and Terok Nor. But making those sort of what we call Timmy cards, that reenact the story, it's very tough to make those effective enough to be playable, but not broken at the same time.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I have an Archaeology Commanders deck put together, and it's silly fun to play, and doesn't win at all.
Right.
So it's like perfect for Josh.
Hey. The same with the Balance of Terror stuff. I can put together a deck where my 3 Federation attack fighters come over and smash your ship, but it's not really gameplay effective.
And I think that's the main limitation is, are we making, I mean, this is 2E, not 1E, so we can't do as, Trek Sense cards as we see in 1E, so we have to, let the gameplay take the driver's seat. Which is why I love my job so much, because I get to see all these crazy things coming out of design and going, I got to think of some story that we haven't used that is going to go on this card somewhere. But I will say, in the famous words of Robert Jordan, if you've read any of the Wheel of Time series, read and find out, or I guess in this case, just stay tuned and find out. There may be something coming down the road for next year, maybe.
All right, thanks, guys. So next, is there anything design and rules can do to address the issue of slow play by high-level players?
Can? Sure. Will? Probably not a good idea. That's more of an OP issue, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if players are intentionally playing slowly, then that's sort of out of design's purview.
I think this was kind of helped by the formats this year with the I'm blanking now. The Swiss tournament, the Swiss rather than the elimination bracket. There are a lot less slow-playing decks.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Josh.
Even in elimination brackets, you learn that if a mod win gets you through, you're gonna get those. So this has been around for a while. It happens every year. It's something, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I figured. It really is more organized play than this, but it was showing up in the questions.
Well, I mean, design can influence the speed of decks by making more powerful cards, stuff that goes faster, but that's not the best solution, I don't think. There's been several suggestions. I think that the way that was it no, it wasn't Continentals. What was the Gen Con tournament that got? Was it Continentals? Yeah, where they didn't use the bracket and it was just Swiss, like Nick was saying. That seemed like a more accurate representation of what people wanted to see. Cut the top 8, let them do another Swiss tournament, and then you crown your champion. Because like Josh was saying, you're not playing a completely different game where mod wins all of a sudden win. I'm no stranger to that, but I appreciate the fact that cutting to Swiss and letting the tournament winner be decided by that. I think that's a better way to go. I mean, I've kind of turned around on that.
And Worlds next year, that's what will be happening again.
Excellent.
All right, so next, what is Slipstream and why is no one playing it?
What is it again? It's the small version that you only have to get some points and something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. As the person who was responsible for Slipstream, let me just say, this was something that was in the original OP guide that we tried one time at San Diego. I think it was a Phoenix tournament. It was kind of fun, We're like, yeah, sure, whatever. And so when we built the original OP guide, we put it in there. Is it time to retire it? Probably. But I mean, it doesn't. It takes up like a paragraph. So for now, it's in there. Why is nobody playing it? Because it's kind of silly, and it might be okay for new players, but at the same time, if they get used to playing those types of decks where they have to do one mission and get 50 points, then all of a sudden throwing them into a game where it's an hour long and you got to score 100 points, it's like, it kind of defeats the purpose. So maybe as a demo game, that might be a good format, but for tournaments, not really. There's no come from behind Slipstream wins.
All right, so next question. Where is the update to Infinite Diversity?
The update for Infinite Diversity has been finished from a playtesting design standpoint for over a year now. And so that's a question for the chairman.
Okay.
Again, it's from what I understand, it's mostly just a resources thing, and is that a priority versus some other stuff that we're trying to do. So yeah, it's just a matter of can we focus some attention on it at some point, and we just haven't got there yet. So yeah, it's coming eventually.
All right, good to know. All right, so last thing for today. Could somebody please spell Stackeron? Because nobody in the survey could.
Stakoron.
Well, by the way, the playtesting name for that region was Over the Rainbow.
Yes, it is.
Nice. So it is in fact completely made up.
Yeah, Stakoron is actually canon in one of the books or something. There's some reference to it.
No, it was in the first season of Deep Space Nine. Like there was an actual episode because I was watching that the other day, and I'm like, oh, that's where those came from.
Yeah. I was assured by my creative team that was actually a legitimate Trek place somewhere. So we didn't just make it up.
Thing.
Yeah. Sometimes we make stuff up. I mean, like you were talking about Brian Evethers earlier. That's actually Irish Stephen Bear, just anagrammed into a weird sounding last name. And Irish Stephen Bear was the showrunner for most of DS9.
Right. All right.
Because
so
it's him on the card.
Yes, it is him on the card. So any last comments from our panelists? So Josh, anything?
I'm good. Yeah, this was fun.
All right, Tyler?
I'd just like to give a shout out to Art, first of all, for doing an amazing job, but then also a shout out to the creative team there's a personnel in our new set, and so in Face of the Enemy. And when we did the design, I put a quote in there, and I was like, "There's no way they'll ever top this quote. Like, this will be the quote of the personnel." And it was, "I will eat your replicated burnt bird meat." and and then creative went and topped it, and I'm just floored by that.
I cannot wait to see that. All right, Matt.
I suppose I could spoil it. I mean, it's just lore, right? The quote that we topped it with was, and get my Tony Todd on. Just a short while ago, I had to stop myself from killing Commander Riker. So, yeah, I was that made me giggle quite a bit when I saw that. I don't even remember who submitted. I think that might have been Ross or Jonathan. One of them put that on there, and I was just like, okay, yeah, that's where we're going with. And then I got a PM from Tyler saying, "Oh my God, it's amazing!" And I'm like, yeah, it's pretty good. As far as overall thoughts on TUI, it's been kind of interesting to see how this year has gone, because in certain aspects, TUI has certainly improved, and I think that's mostly on the back end as far as design has improved, their process, communication across the board has really increased to the point where it feels like we're working on the same thing at the same time, and especially the design schedule, the timing of being consistent with the output, I feel like has really stabilized, and I hope that everybody is experiencing the benefits of that. I know I am. I love getting new cards every 4 months or whatever we're doing now, and it's, you think about how it was before, where you'd have, for me, I would get a set to put through creative. We'd spend a couple weeks on it, and then it would be 5-6 months before we heard anything else. And all of a sudden now we're done with the set, and like 2 weeks go by, and I've got a new set coming in from design that we get to make new stuff for. And I'm really happy with how the consistency has improved with the output for TUI, and I think our level of quality has improved as well.
All right, and finally from Nick, any final thoughts?
I just really want to thank all these everyone involved in TUI. I mean, obviously I am resigning, although I still haven't quite gone yet. And I would like to thank everyone, because the whole TUI team, is absolutely fantastic. Art, errata, creative, rules, even design, they're not bad. And I'd just like to, thank everyone. And also remind everyone to come to London next year and win this belt if you can.
I'm already shopping plane tickets. I just have to have my sabbatical approved.
Tyler, Matt, Josh?
Yeah. I might even bring a baby with me.
Cool.
All right, so Josh Sheets, Matt Kirk, Nick Yankovic, Tyler Foltz, thank you so very much for sitting in with us on the second edition period of review. I am Maggie Geppert, known as Jadziadax8 on the boards, and thank you to everyone for watching us today. All right, I will see everybody tomorrow for the first edition period of review.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Maggie.